Yeah, it's a bit hectic here.
Okay, I know.
Yeah, with all the school from home.
Good
And
afternoon.
it's also like almost
Yeah.
7:30 in Australia.
Terima
Halo,
kasih,
Kak Laina.
Mas
Halo,
Lambang.
Mr. Lambang.
J, is that possible for 3 minutes? I will pray for a while.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
it's okay. It's okay. 5 minutes will be okay for you.
Okay,
It's okay.
thank you.
Because
Yeah.
because Mr. Lambang is he is guiding a discussion in ELSAM. ELSAM is a research it's a civil society organization, yeah, focusing on environmental issues since this morning, since early morning. So I think he's just finished his role there.
Yeah, we also have Madi from Myanmar.
Madi.
Hello, Madi.
Hi, Madi. Madi, yeah. Do I pronounce your name well, correctly? Madi or Madi?
Do we have a guest here, Mbak Anita Wahid?
Yeah, hello, Mbak Anita Wahid. Welcome.
Halo, Mbak Anita.
Halo, Mas Wija. Halo, Mas Gulam.
Saya Gulam, Mbak Anita. Ya, it's an honor to have you here.
Saya numpang belajar ya, Mas ya.
Ya, silakan Mbak Anita.
Kita belajar sama-sama, Mbak.
Terima kasih.
Hopefully someday you will be our speaker from different kind of event, Mbak.
Yeah, that's for sure. Tentunya ya. So,
if I can be of any help, I'd be honored.
So Pak Gulam is my colleague here, Mbak Anita.
Yes, yes.
And also I noticed here Bu Nimade ya, Sukartini. Yeah, good afternoon, Bu Nimade. Good afternoon, Mbak Anita. Mbak, this forum will be delivered in English, ya. So early this morning, I was in a same forum with Mbak Anita about advocating the marginalized communities. Kelompok rentan tuh apa sih bahasa Inggrisnya?
Vulnerable groups ya.
Vulnerable groups, yeah. Yeah, but they're also marginalized, right? In a way. So the discussion today will be about digital law, yeah.
Law and digital rights in Indonesia.
Yeah, law and digital rights to be more precise.
Yeah. And
yes, Lalaina, are you on vacation right now?
No, I'm sorry, I could not use the background. Hello, by the way. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm just using this background because that one, I don't know why I cannot use it.
You cannot use that one? It also happens to me. I use it every day, but not this time. I cannot use it. I don't know why. So Ross Tapsel was your supervisor, Mbak Anita.
Well, he is my proposed supervisor, but in order for him to be my supervisor, I need to be admitted to ANU first, which I'm still waiting confirmation on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought he's your supervisor for your master thesis or something. No.
No, he's going to be my supervisor for my PhD.
Yeah. It actually almost happened to me 7 years ago. But I was then accepted in Leiden University for the scholarship, so I went to Leiden instead. So it's more or less like you, yeah. I met him, and then he said, perhaps I could be your supervisor, and then, but back then, I have to find a scholarship as well, and it happened that Leiden was destined to me, yeah, not ANU. So I was destined to travel Europe, then Australia. yeah, I think that's not that's not too bad, right? Or even better.
Of course, getting into later is also a great thing. But this is I think the unorthodox things, because I received the scholarship first, and then with the scholarship giver, we then decided on which university will be the best, and then apply there. So it's the scholarship first that I got. Then
So you already got a scholarship.
yes.
So that's much easier then.
Hopefully so.
You only have to find a university, right? With this.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, I think that's much easier, and yeah, good luck.
Thank you so much.
So you plan to start this year, maybe?
Well, it really depends on the Australian border when it's going to be open for public, because the scholarship giver really doesn't have an online scheme, so we have to be there in order for the study to start.
And we cannot predict the future, yeah, in terms of this pandemic, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes it was like, oh, it's over, yeah, or it's almost over, and then suddenly it's happening again. And also it impacts the policy, the border policy.
Yes, we're still aiming to start on February 2022.
Okay, February 2022. Yeah, that's quite soon, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. That's why I need to get back into learning mode. That's why I'm in this class.
That's right. So that's why you are here, yeah? So welcome to this
Mbak
class.
Anita.
Hai, Mas Lambang.
Okay.
Shall we start?
We already have the speaker together with us, joining again. And let me introduce our speaker. Mas Herlambang is a lecturer of Faculty of Law in Airlangga University.
That's a nice picture anyway.
Yes?
It's a nice picture of Mas Herlambang.
Okay. Yeah. Instead of a portfolio that all of you can see and can read, I found that something interesting about Mas Herlambang. Actually, he involved in many kind of advocacy, starting from the poor people with the civic administration problem, and also I think the bigger things about labor, about community, and yes, he always with the people who need for help in the matter of law. Even though, as I can read and understand it, Mas Herlambang refused to be called as an activist, but I think his activity in the field of law, I think more or less quite the same with Adnan Puyung Nasution, because both of them, I think, try to make a change, structural change of law. It means that the law is not merely for the people who have the money or the rich people, but also the law is for the people at all. I quote his statement that social justice must be started with the legal education, which is open towards reality of oppression, social unjust, as well as law manipulation for the sake of individual or group. So yesterday we already have a session about the political aspect of digital media or digital politics, and right now we will hear different kind of perspective from the perspective of law. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Herlambang Perdana Wiratraman.
Thank you very much, Pak Gulam, for a very kind introduction. Even I just noticed with this very old picture, yeah, it's long time ago. I don't know who did you get that picture. Good afternoon, everyone. Really love to share the topics in relation to law and digital rights. And This is also a good opportunity for me to share an update regarding to current issues on law and digital rights in Indonesia. Although discussing about context of Indonesia, but perhaps we also need to see the context in relation to the regional context or the current issues in growing issues in the region. I prepare with points, PowerPoints that it might be help me for easier presentation. Yeah. I saw many friends in this forum. I hope we could share on the basis of our experience, because of course you may notice this is not new at all for you. Yeah. Okay. 3 points that I would like to share. The first one is law and its context regarding digital rights, global to national, and current issues in regions, especially in Southeast Asia and Indonesia. And the last one, it will be necessary to understand the contextual analysis on digital rights, especially in authoritarianism term. Start with law and context. There are several legal framework that we could refer in discussing about digital rights, and this is part of freedom of expression. And under Article 19, of course, that we could express freely to say something, to express something through many various medium. And hence, including in the current situation, we have digital technology or internet. So then we have internet rights in the current situations. And interestingly, although several debates before, and finally the United Nations General Assembly through its resolutions already mentioned about the importance of the rights of internet, especially under the name the promotion, protection, and enjoyment of human rights on the internet. This resolution actually a very short resolutions. Yeah, you know, resolution is not really long articles or many articles in it, but this is only informing us that affirms that same rights that people have offline must also be protected online, in particular freedom of expression, which is applicable regardless of frontiers and through any media of one's choices, in accordance with Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and ICCPR. Based on Indonesia's legal system, actually Indonesia has ratified Article 19 of ICCPR. It was enacted in 2005 under the law number 12 of 2005. Yeah. Soon after the president announced about the rise in increasing the price of the full price, and then after increasing the full price, then many people actually collapsed at the time. But at the same time, the government ratified two international covenants, which is international covenant on economic, social, and cultural rights, and also international covenant on civil and political rights. Hence, we have this law in this country, in Indonesia. Interestingly, after the adoption of that resolution, we call it resolution number 20/8, which focuses on freedom of expressions. Human Rights Council has passed a number of resolutions reaffirming that human rights must be protected online with a broader scope. There are several resolutions enacted after that. For example, related to resolution 2021/16 and also 24/5, yeah, on the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and associations, reminds state of their obligation to respect and fully protect the rights of all individuals to assemble peacefully and associate freely online as well as offline. So explicitly introduced online as part of the freedom. And another resolutions 22/6 on protecting human rights defenders recognize also new forms of communications, including the dissemination of information online and offline. Another resolution 23/2, this is related to the role of freedom of opinion and expression in women's empowerment, related to also online. And also the last but not least, this is very interesting also to protect especially the work of journalists. Based on Human Rights Council resolutions on the safety of journalists and civil society space, also consider the internet related dimensions of these issues. Even under resolution 68, number 163, safety of journalists and the issue of impunity acknowledge the online aspect of journalism. I work closely with this resolution, especially safety of journalists, when I was in Geneva, and we discussed about this. And quite interesting that now the disruption because of technology affect to many human life and also working situations, especially journalists in reporting news. Now is many of news media shifted to new platform through digital technology. Hence, the risk of the journalism also came from the online threat. Yeah. Therefore, safety of journalists also covers on this issue. Apologize for this Indonesian language, but this is actually new standard. I would like to describe first about the law in the context of Indonesia. This is new standard just adopted by Indonesian National Human Rights Commission, which is standard of norms and regulations and rules. Standards of norms and rules number 5 on freedom of opinion and expression. The standard has adopted a lot of specific rights and freedoms in relation to how to interpret Article 19 of ICCPR or UDHR, yeah, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And hence we get impression that a lot of issues actually involved in freedom of expression and opinion, including if you refer to these internet rights or digital rights, referring to this standard actually has been articulated in a very comprehensive and also explaining standard for limiting also how the mechanism in limit the rights or freedom, such freedom, including online expression. Okay, now I turn to current issues, especially on digital rights. Yeah, Southeast Asia to Indonesia. Just informing that we have a problem, for instance, like with the internet shutdown in the globe. India is the highest numbers of internet shutdowns, followed by Yemen Ethiopia, Jordan, and many others. Well, if you see this rank, actually no Indonesia. I have no idea in detail why there is no Indonesia. Although Indonesia actually, yes, first already involved in carrying out the internet shutdown. It was in 2019, but is not the solely evidence because the previous one happened in the front of the General Election Committee in Jakarta. The government did the internet shutdown, and then after the decision of administrative court decision in 2020 in June, and then followed by several months doing internet shutdown. And if you see this where social media is suppressed, and Indonesia was colored by what is that? The light red, yeah. And it means that not really in a good situations in response to social media. In general, we have the issue of fake news as well in relation to digital authoritarianism. This word is now is growing and getting paid attention by many, and it's not typically Indonesia, but also in neighboring countries, including Myanmar, Thailand, Philippines. I'm not sure with Malaysia and Singapore, but at least I could say that several countries, neighboring countries, have similar situations, especially dealing with fake news laws or cyber defamation, and this is also the key point in bringing the situation of digital authoritarianism. And another publication that I released also in relation to this issue, you can download for free these articles and also the book. This is related to the context of COVID pandemic, and its relation to internet. How about Indonesia? Yes, we have populations in detail, mobile connection, internet users, active social media users, one of the biggest or the highest numbers of people use social media. And you can compare with the digital around the world. This is a good data to see how a very influential internet in this country, although the network or the signals could not reach to every corner of Indonesia region. And I would like to see also, I would like to provide evidence also carried by the World Justice Project, telling us about the Rule of Law Index, 2020. Based on this, actually, in opposite with what LP3S has been mentioning for many times about the declining democracy, but according to this World Justice Project, the Indonesian rank on rule of law is getting higher or increasing, although small numbers, 0.1% to 2.0%. Yeah. Of course, we can challenge this, the scores. We can investigate more whether this is reliable, based on the reliable data or not. But for me, this is to what extent the way to see rule of law, especially the work of state and also law itself, law in each applications, because the government indeed quote unquote respecting the law, but subverting substantial and more fundamental content of the law. Therefore, it's more formalism in that sense. And based on Reporters Without Borders also mentioned about the rank, but this is precisely correct or nearly similar to my observation so far, that Indonesia has been ranked to red situations. It means that danger situations for journalists, including many cases in relation to digital rights, digital or online journalism, or even the journalist has been targeted for specific law in relation to criminal defamations or many other, including hate speech and so on. And even last night, we had a meeting until midnight with numbers of group coalitions in defending Asrul, one of journalists based in Palopo. Also, he was accused for defaming somebody because of each news report, but surely this is actually should be dealt with the press law, not electronic information and transaction law, which cover about cyber defamation. I will tell you later if there is any more discussion on this. I think this is more important for me to explain because talking about contextual issues. The situations perhaps has been well known among academia or scholars or civil society organizations that we are facing the situations of illiberal democracy, declining democracy, democratic setbacks, and many others. And quite interesting, many of them actually named with various words, not because the scholars creative, although this is a creative one, but too many names embedded in Jokowi's administrations, especially during second period of his office. As perhaps Pak Wija already mentioned about this, the context of law, especially dealing with the turn to Jokowi's authoritarianism. And I mentioned also digital authoritarianism from SafeNet. SafeNet is part of this summer course. Okay, I will say something about this. This is actually what we call telegram, produced or enacted by the national police. And interestingly, the police also published this in order to give order to the police in the lower institutions or lower ranks, how to operational instructions, especially how to create the orders. Unfortunately, based on their orders, based on this telegram, we call it telegram, but this is actually sort of like a letter of instruction for the lower police level. According to this, actually the national police also introduced counter narrative. What is counter narrative? Counter narrative means that the police can do investigations, looking at the social media postings, and also trying to make discourse, countering discourse, for those criticizing, for instance, like to the police or to the government or to many others, criticism of our policies, laws, and many others. And it's quite interesting because for the first time, police has this authority to make a counter narrative, and not only with this authority, they also go. The police has also created, interestingly, um, uh, detain or proceed anyone who criticize the government, although according to the constitutional court rulings, actually criticizing the government, including the president, is allowed because the article has been annulled or deleted under criminal code in Indonesia's legal system. Hence, you can criticize actually to the Jokowi's president because of the annulment of specific article under penal code. But interestingly, the police through this telegram enacted the law for police at lower level to silence the critics, not only by countering narrative, but also by silencing critics, bringing them to the jail, bringing them to the legal or judicial process. So this is really contradictory to the national legal system, including judicial rulings. The previous one, in 2019, when the Indonesian Legal Aid Foundation already released the report in 2019 that more than 5,000, if I'm not mistaken, has been detained because of criticizing, involving, or participating in the demonstrations and many others. But the problem is the coordinating minister of political, legal, and security released the decree number 38 concerning legal assistance team. And based on that decree, actually allows the government to oversee the speeches, actions, thoughts of public figures who are considered to violate law. Aimed at balance, according to them, aim at balancing freedom of opinion and enforcement of the Constitution. Of course, this is very tricky and below the standard, yeah, and contrary to the principles of rule of law, and unconstitutional, threatening free expression, democracy, and of course, it will violate human rights and fundamental freedoms. Based on this, actually, they more targeting the internet or online expressions, because it's become evidence that people can express their feelings or their opinion through digital platform, including social media. In relation to that, especially during pandemic of COVID-19, academic from University of Indonesia, Pandu Riono, he criticized the collaborative work between my university, Airlangga University, State Intelligence Agency, and Army to create drugs for countering the pandemic, to fight the COVID. Yeah. But interestingly, after he criticized the process of in creating the drug, he got a lot of attacks, yeah, especially in digital platform, because his Twitter has been has been hijacked by some unclear person, and even interestingly, other research centers, CISDI, after carrying out research for gathering data, many data, very important basis in helping the government actually for countering the pandemic, but their data in their website has been also deleted, yeah, attacked by of course unknown person, and deleting all informations at their website. And this these were not merely about the criticism against COVID, but also happened to many other issues. Yeah. And continue to that situations, especially in 2019, back to 2019, after racism attacks in Surabaya and actually in many other cities in Java, especially in reaction to that racisms, many West Papua people, and also in solidarity with anti-racism movement, the strikes and also expressions had been easily silenced because of internet shutdown or blackout. Yeah. And even throttling. Yeah, throttling means decreasing the bandwidth in order to also making it difficult to use digital platform. And clearly, actually, it was the government informed to the public by making internet shutdown or blackout, merely use press release, not legal basis, or doing or limiting the rights by, for instance, like decree, but it was no legal basis actually. First, no legal basis. Second, not using a proper law or decision in order to do internet shutdown. Even my position is rejecting internet shutdown because it's clear violating rights. And based on they use Article 40 of Law Number 19/2016. This is related to electronic information and transaction, which is a revision of the law, the previous law. But under this law, there is no legal basis for internet shutdown. But the government argued using this law in order to limit internet access. And hence, actually, it was as part of misusing legal interpretations. I call excessive reasoning. Such article limits to content. Actually, such article explicitly limits to content that violates the law, not deleting access or stopping access, internet access for the people. Okay, this is related to my explanation before. The reasons why the government use internet shutdown, because they use argument the spread of hoaxes that triggered the action according to their press release. And the second reason is to accelerate the restorations of security and order situation in Indonesia and its surroundings. And the third, the high distribution and transmission of hoax informations, hoax information, false news, provocations, racist hate speech, and incitement, according to their press release. Of course, we rejected these arguments or these reasons, and SafeNet and Independent Journalists Associations filed the case to the Jakarta Administrative Court, and I was part of the process. And actually, the government not using the proper mechanism, and even did not consider the legal doctrine, especially how to limit free expressions or to limit the internet access. Yes, the internet access or freedom of expression are part of derogable rights. The government can limit, but the way to limit must be in accordance to the human rights instruments, which is related to Article 19, Section 3, and this is also translated into the legal doctrine. We call it a Siracusa Principles Doctrine. Based on Siracusa Principles Doctrine, in order to limit, must be confirmed 3 elements. The first one is prescribed by the law. The second one is what is that? The second one is legitimate aim. The third one is must be proportional or necessary in limiting the freedom. And hence, we try to convince the judges, and really our arguments were what is that? Extensively accepted in considering their decisions. And finally, the civil society groups, including SafeNet and independent journalist associations, won the case against the Minister of Communication and Jokowi as a president. Okay, now I will try to make it quickly because it's already 30 minutes about cyber defamations. The key question for this is how the cyber defamation law has been used to silence criticism, including news media. In Indonesia, I think SafeNet perhaps already mentioned about the data about this case. A teacher, women teacher, jailed for using call recordings as evidence of sexual harassment. She was actually released according to the district court rulings at the local level. But in the cassation, it means that using appeal process at the Supreme Court, the decision overturned, and she was charged by, if I'm not mistaken, more than 5 years. And of course, it provoked many protests, in the public sphere, because she was actually as part of the victim because sexual harassment. And finally, because of the electronic information and transaction law, that law can prosecute her and sentence her for that. Luckily, after making a wide range solidarity in the parliament member and also at the presidential process in making a decision, and then the president finally released amnesty. For the first time in Indonesia's legal history, the president released non-political amnesty, which was for Baik Nuril, women teacher from Mataram, West Nusa Tenggara. But we have many other cases following her, until present. For instance, like lecturers targeting journalists, students, researchers, and many others. The issue of Papua, this is, I would like to emphasize this issue because when we are discussing about Papua, it's very, the first one is sensitive in regards to how to defend them. Even just a few weeks ago, the director of Legal Aid Foundation in Bali was criminalized because of providing space for free expressions in relation to Papua issues. What I would like to relate to this was Veronica Koman, a woman, also former legal aid defenders, legal aid and human rights defenders, I mean. And she really active in defending Papuans' rights, and also quite blatantly saying to the public, criticizing the government. But because of criticism, the police issue red notice to the international police and asking to detain Veronica Koman. While to my understanding so far, she really active inform the truth, yeah, and the government really afraid with the truth that she delivered to the public. And it happened also to filmmaker Dandi Laksono in the same year, 2019, when Dandi Laksono also released the, not release, provide the arguments on informing to the public through his Twitter, and he was also asked to coming to the police for making accountability for his social media, especially related to the clash in Papua. In general, I just to give a few examples, but in general, the law, cyber defamations related to not merely about the Papua, but also exposing sexual violations, anti-corruption, political opponents, fair election, fair trade, academic freedom, journalism, and free press. Behind the screen, actually, there are several issues, yeah, why the law has been used. The first one is impunity, because no responsibility if the government use this law. Hoaxes, populism, money politics, oligarchy behind the screen, market-friendly policies, and feudalism, plus cartel politics behind the work of this law. Concluding remarks. So, just few of points that I would like to make point out. The first one, regarding the internet shutdown, of course, no legitimate aim for internet shutdown. Internet rights as human rights. However, the minister never heard civil society organizations and human rights commission, especially dealing with the standard, because under the current situations, the Jokowi, after many people, civil organizations, civil society organizations, and journalists push the Jokowi for revising the law, EIT, the law, Electronic Information and Transaction, the law. Jokowi mentioned to the public, yes, we will revise the law, but then they changed. The Minister of Communications changed by providing guidance, which is really below the human rights standard. Below the way to limit freedom of expression, especially dealing with the Article 19, Section 3, and below the standard, below the doctrine, legal doctrine as well. The second, the problem is no independent authority, especially for monitoring the internet governance. The third, limited or even no standard setting for regulating internet in protecting rights. Of course, it lead uncertainty and highly misuse. And all these things actually related to the political context of declining democracy in Indonesia. Why? What is the real situations? These digital attacks are easy to launch because of the limited digital security infrastructure, means law, institutions, and governance system, not only in Indonesia, but throughout the world. Learning from cases at field, especially dealing with the criminalizations, human rights abuses, and its impunity circuit, excessive exploitation of natural resources, and numerous attacks to the press and academic freedoms, provide stronger evidence to see the rise of authoritarianism in Indonesia. What is happening and worrying is the consequences of juxtaposition, the locality of the oligarch power right now, which integrates the economics of global capitalism and cartelized political parties. Last but not least, this is related to the pandemic. This is really a big concern for us because of pandemic or during pandemic situations, addressing serious threats. Many human rights experts concerned about the pattern of attacks, during the pandemic, including barriers to accessing basic human rights and services because of attacking digital platform, attacks on independent and diverse media, algorithmic discrimination, targeted surveillance, and online threats against human rights defenders. And because of pandemic as well, we are facing digital inequalities and becoming deepening, underscoring that actually important, we must leave no one behind, offline or online. Therefore, platform must be inclusive through engaging people on the ground. And the states actually should maintain their obligation to promote and protect human rights, including initiatives to regulate online space grounded in human rights standards. And the last one is about activists at risk. I think this all my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Herlambang, for the clear insight about the development of law on digital in Indonesia. We already have one from Himas Muhammadi Imanullah El Hakim. You'd like to raise question? Mas El Hakim, yes. Please.
Yes, yeah. But I'm sorry before because I must off cam since my signal is not really good. Because with all due respect. Okay, first thing first, I really appreciate my senior, my lecturer, Mr. Herlambang, to talking about this. Since today, at this moment, digital world is also become very ridiculous. Since, as we know, Juliari Batubara as one of the most great or big case in Indonesia has been accused for 12 years. But what is ridiculous is the judge made the verdict is lower or not really big, since Juliari has been bullied or has been, what we call it, attacked in by netizens. So I think this is ridiculous. This is maybe something that we must see as a political and legal phenomena in cyber world. So what do you think about this? That when judicial system fail us, and the second one is, what do you think, Mr. About why we not replacing human-based judicial system with robotic or mechanical driven, such as AI, so we can replace police or maybe jaksa with just AI. So this can make our judicial system is really effective and less corrupt. And the last one is, what do you think about the progress of digital privacy and digital protection law or RUU PDP at this moment? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mas El Hakim. Yeah, it's 3 questions, and I think it is a very difficult question because it deals with the facts that happened in us recently. First, about the case of Juliari Batubara. It is purely law matters, but we cannot put aside the influence from the social media, from the public pressure, and also about I think the second thing is also important to replace the legal actor using artificial intelligence. And I just heard, and I think it is interesting if we also heard the response from Mas Herlambang. And the last thing is about the draft of the law. So directly, please to Mas Herlambang to respond the question.
Okay, thank you, Hakim. I could feel your questions. Yeah, the first one is about the latest the largest decisions has been made by the judges in the corruption, anti-corruption court. Yeah, for those who are not familiar with this issue, actually the judges released the decision with the reason for lowering the sentence because of the reason is related to because the corruptors got many attacks, yeah, from people, from citizens, and according to the judge or panel of judges, because of that bullying or attack from the people, the corruptors really suffered. Yeah. And this is quite unique. My argument is first contradict to the criminal doctrine, how to sentence, especially punishment doctrine. Yeah, this is not related to the law. This is really intuition from the judges. The second, how to read this actually must be contextualized with the current issues related to the judicial power. To what extent the judicial power has been influenced by the regime, and I would share my my latest publication in relation to this. I've seen several evidence that explicitly and clearly providing arguments that judicial positions also has been really influenced by the state, I mean the regime, yeah, especially authoritarian regime. Therefore, to what extent such influence can be used, yeah, as arguments, I reflect to several cases actually previously, and this is related to the corruption issues, anti-corruption issues, which was related to Novel Baswedan case. One of the case involved to the prosecutors, and that prosecutors has been attacked by we have not known, not really clear who is actually masterminds of attacking anti-corruption prosecutors. And because of that court sessions, I argued that it's really influential in silencing critics and even making impunity through the court system. The other case that I point out related to Budi Pego, environmental defenders in Banyuwangi. Also, he was sentenced because of the role of capital owner, and also Munir's case, yeah, cannot be prosecuted because of that. So hence my short message on this issue, that the court proceedings or judicial process has been really influenced to the current regime. Second, issues related to what is your opinion related to robotics or AI? Do we need to replace judges by AI system? Yeah, I would love to do that. No, because based on the what is that in it was 2017 December, 100 lawyers from 100 law firms against one robot, yeah, to solve the what is that the fraud case in insurance issues. Based on that games, the robot win the case with 89 of accuracy, while lawyers only 63% of accuracy in answering the fraud case, yeah, related to the insurance. And you can check, yeah, robot versus lawyer, London 2017. You will get the news in detail. And you know, because robot is no need to go to toilet, and second, no need coffee, yeah, for answering the question. Therefore, they can be you know, bright, yeah. But my argument is, or my reflection on this, in the coming future, we need to protect this system, especially dealing with AI. In current situations at law schools, it's very limited offering subject law and artificial intelligence. It's very rare. Even at my campus, only cyber law as a subject, not specific on AI. While in our neighboring countries like Singapore, in Singapore, they have and US really providing a very comprehensive in preparing digital technology and law in the coming future. And even judges, the chief of Supreme Court in Singapore already mentioned about the role of judges in Supreme Court. They use artificial intelligence in deciding court rulings, even in private or criminal issues. And it's quite interesting, not only Singapore, but also India and many other countries. And Indonesia should prepare for that. And this is precisely connected to your third questions. It's about data protections and also privacy. The issue of privacy is very weak in this country. Anything can be tapped, anything can be hijacked. Mr. Wija already experienced for many times his social media hijacked by someone else, and even groups, yeah.
Mr. Lambang too, of course.
Yeah, because in solidarity with you, yeah.
That's why we meet, yeah.
The problem in Indonesia, we have no data protection law in specifically. Second, privacy issues is very weak, even not really strong in our legal system. Therefore, the authority can intervene privacy. While we know that privacy is human rights, as part of human rights, it's really important to be protected. And the problem is sometimes the government use this idea, for instance, like data protections, to change the system. Like if you are aware with why the anti-corruption, anti-graft commission, KPK, the anti-corruption commission has been changed. I mean, the law has been changed because of the government narrating that it's really important to have data protection. Yeah. Therefore, they set up the superior body, monitoring institutions, in order to protect data protection. But it's really fake. Yeah, for me, it's really fake, because the real data protection should be protected under special law, protecting all those governance system, including privacy. Unfortunately, we have no such the law. We have the draft now is still going on. But certainly, I promote also the importance of data protection in this country in order to anticipating the problem of internet rights in the future.
Still have one question.
Thank you, sir.
About the draft of policy on
in chat box, yeah. Oh, a lot. Okay. From which one?
Oh, we move to different kind of question then.
From Taufan, Malaka. I
Okay.
know is person from Nagoya.
Yes.
My question is, do you know how do democratic countries exercise their democracy at the same time they save their national interest, pluralism, economic development, and many expected ideal policies? Do we need to learn from them how to improve our rule of law? It's general questions, yeah, not related to this topic specifically. However, talking about rule of law, of course, in the in the near future, we are dealing with this issue, especially related to the digital technologies, because now is growing studies the relation between rule of law and digital technologies, because affecting many human life, even disrupting, yeah, for our daily life. And my point is, of course, we need to learn from the role of especially in bringing the message of human rights, yeah, standard of human rights for this. I will address the criticism, yeah, at the current government, especially when they try to improve the digital governance, but never heard voices from the people or even from National Human Rights Commission in relation to how to formulate the digital rights in proper way. Yeah. I could argue that until present, digital rights has been formulated under the law, but it's really below the human rights standard. Still a long way to go, yeah, for for adopting human rights standard, especially related to digital rights.
Okay. Can we invite the S2 Putri Wilujeng for the question about skeptical about law, and she also cites about the government plan for making omnibus law in digital information. S2, can you speak up? Hello? Hello, S2. Are you with us, S2?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Please.
Okay, I will read my question.
Okay.
If law, including the use of it, tend to protect the higher capital in the digital space to attack the lesser capital, or who against the higher capital, then what do we expect from the law? What should we do on the law? Do we always need the advocation, or depends on the advocation, or only the advocation, or is there any else thing that we can do? Because based on the progress in the Southeast Asia, like you have presented, I'm a little bit skeptical on the law. Moreover, there was discourse about the omnibus law for the digital space. As we know, the omnibus law is biggest, and we cannot do anything about the approval of that law. Or the yeah, okay. And then how do we face those situations? That is my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, S2.
Indeed, this is an easy task, yeah, for legal scholars, yeah, to bring the message, the importance of law. Because when we are discussing law, sometimes the authority did not tell us about the law. They just tell us about the rules, not the law. Yeah, two different things. Talking about law means must be justice in it, yeah, and also benefit for the people. It means meaningful, and also reflecting certainty in that regards. But the process of formulating the law, even it seems like political. It has been always influenced by the dominant actors who occupied the formal representation at the parliament. And this is not new. 1.5 century ago, Marx already mentioned about this. Those who are really having a capital, of course, or capital or position or class, they can be a rulers. Yeah, and this is again, this is not new at all. But of course, as a citizen, we have to have a better and proper law in order to protect us, because the nature of law actually the way to limit the power and also to implement the rights, what we call as constitutionalism. And what we are discussing right now is trying to bring the message of human rights constitutionalism. So yes, I discuss or share about law and digital rights, but this is in the spirit of human rights constitutionalism, trying to limit the power, but encourage or to bring the message of promotion of rule of law, especially to protect the people. I could not, avoid many people really skeptical with the law. Even we are really skeptical, perhaps, yeah, with politics, yeah, similar to the politics, economics, communications, or many others, even public health. Yeah. Do you believe with the public health authority in managing the pandemics while we are facing thousands of people pass away every day? I can see what we are facing is really extraordinary situations. It's really humanity crisis, yeah, right now. And this is not merely or solely the task of law. This is more. I think we need more collaborative works with various parts of professions or civil society organizations in hand for defending our rights, our rule of law. Otherwise, we just lose the hope. I believe that with the strategy that since what we are facing is oligarch, yeah, oligarch system, well, the politics is cartelized political system, but we have to put strengthening coalitions and solidarity in bringing the better situations. Although this is what the James Scott say about the not really like flash in the flash in the raining situations, but it's really step by step strategy in making change situations.
Okay, thank you, Mas Herlambang. There is a compliment for Pak Abu Bakar Ebihara at the chat room, and I'd like to invite Malik Akbar for a question, please. Hello, Malik Akbar.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Come on.
My connection is not good, perhaps.
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the chance. My question is, according of the case 1 year ago, the society makes gugatan to Petun because a president of Joko Widodo blocked a network in Papua, used his power as the president. My question is, call the House of Representatives Parliament to impeachment the President of the Republic Indonesia. Thank you.
Because of that court decision.
Right.
Yeah. First, in theory, it can be possible. Second, in normative framework, constitutional basis, it can be also used to impeach. But in reality, it might be different things. Because for the parliament, we are entering the situations of cartelized political system. In other words, Cruskido Ambardi already made dissertations. His dissertation title was, I forgot in detail, but the content of that his dissertation related to cartelized political party. This is related to why cartelized system has been influenced in our politics, including how to see the relation between Senayan and Istana, presidential palace and parliament. Yeah, you can see also how the law has been produced by those institutions, and therefore we need to emphasize the importance of the judicial decisions. We are expecting the judicial decisions or judicial position would be more independent, not easily influenced by parliament and presidential institutions. But the fact, if you are asking about the possibility of impeachment, learning from Gajah Mada University student, when they discuss about this, they got attacked. Even the resource person has been attacked also at her house, Professor Nikmatul. Even the Tempo who reported about this also was, what is that? His Twitter, Budi Setiarso, also hijacked by somebody else, and Tempo has been deleted their website. So it's really invasive. Well, as usual, impunity. No one responsible in this case. So discussing about impeachment, it's getting normal in the class, but not in the public. Second, as I mentioned in the very beginning, theoretically, constitutionally allows possibility possible to bring this your message, but it's in real politics quite difficult because of given context of cartelized political system.
Okay, thank you, Pak Herlambang. That's why sometimes politics become the kingmaker, right? I will invite Mbak Nina Susilo for the next question.
Mbak Nina,
Mbak Nina, please.
My friend from the long time ago, still friend.
And thank you for the insightful presentation, Mas Herlambang. And it's about the government that you had mentioned, that they will always argue that they have to control the situation, they have to prevent riots or stop hoax, etc. And then these kind of arguments will be used to justify the internet blockade, or maybe to take down some content in Twitter or another social media. So I'm wondering if it's about government failure to understand the human rights principle, or is it pure neo-authoritarianism, as you mentioned in your paper, or how to ensure the law will apply the human rights principle, so it can be really implemented in Indonesia. I mean, even though, okay, we will have to have a balance between the arguments the government used, so but how to ensure the human rights applied? Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you, Mbak Nina. I really love with your dog banking. Yeah, it seems like greeting me. uh, uh, First of all, talking about the riots, yeah, of course, the government always argue about how to make an order, creating the safe situations, even defending national interests and so on. Yeah, we can see also in the case of Papua, especially. Yeah, when the quote unquote riots, although it was really peacefully demonstrations or strikes, yeah, in Papua or in Jakarta, even Surya Anta and friends, but the government used makar, treason charge for them, and 99 Papuans or those who those who support them in solidarity has been charged by treason in the name of nationalism, in the name of unity of Indonesia, and many other reasons. It's really what is that in under nationalism issues. First, my point, whether those charges really in accordance to our standard, especially penal code, no, that is violating principles of legality, especially referring to the Constitutional Court decision number 2000. I forgot the number, but in 2017, how to translate makar or treason. This is a specific act, a criminal act, must be accompanied with the attacks, yeah, direct attacks, not intention, not just flagging Bintang Kejora flag, yeah. While Gus Dur already mentioned, yeah, Bu Anita, it's culture symbols, it's not makar things, yeah, or treason things. So I would say that this is contradict to the principles of penal code. Second is contradict to the Constitutional Court decisions. And from the human rights perspective, this is also contradict to the principles Article 19, Section 3. Especially related to the standard in limiting rights, because the government or authority did not use a proper law enforcement, and even below the standard, because actually if the government used the word riots, chaotic, unstable situations, even nationalism, I would suggest, if I'm part of the one who can suggest, yeah, the government, although I'm not there at their office, yeah. I will ask the government not yet. That's for you. I will suggest, I will suggest the government to check Johannesburg principles on security and right to information. It's clear, detail, how to measures about the riots, nationalism, and many others. Because to my understanding, on the basis of International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and also from the Johannesburg principles, political expressions, including referendum, trying to get political voices heard by the public, is protected expressions, legally protected. And even from national history, we already had experience when the Timor-Leste, yeah, made referendum. We have we provide, yeah, referendum for them, and this is not contradict to the Indonesian legal system, because under the penal code, even those who are expressing politically to express, for instance, like referendum, must be protected according to our law. perhaps you ask further question, why so many people in Papua were arrested? Even in the coming sessions, I will be defending Victoria in the court. Yeah, because I would say this is also my latest article, yeah, in 2021. What I call our law enforcement is has been influenced by not really mentioning authoritarian, but I would say racism racism political which embedded in our law institutions. So embedded racism politics. That's my words for that article. So you can also access, just type Herlambang, Papua racism, embedded racism politics. You will get the articles. So my argument is like that. It's not really about the law. It's not really about the riots. This is about racism.
So it's
embedded in our.
So it's always how they use the point of view of Jakarta to see the problem in Papua for this case.
Yes. Including, yeah, when including the what I would like to connect with this summer course related to digital rights. Yeah, you see the case of Veronica Koman, you see the case of Dandi Laksono, even many other cases related to the digital security, talking about the issue of internet shutdown. It seems like a very different, yeah, to treat Papua, and this is also connected to our law enforcement. Perhaps this is not easily to convince others, yeah, but my argument is based on my experiences defending Papuans in the court for many times, especially by using human rights standard, freedom of expression, and also criticizing about the policies, yeah. What you mentioned about Jakarta, quote unquote, yeah. You can refer also to the latest bill or law in relation to special autonomy, and it's surprisingly for me, based on that new law, special autonomy, the Papua could not establish local political party. That is also limiting freedom of expressions, limiting as well freedom of political expression. So can you imagine how we can learn from other or previous issues like Aceh, when Aceh got special autonomy by establishing their local political party, but not in the case of Papua. I can say many things not in the case of Papua, quote unquote. Yeah, for instance, like Jokowi gave many lands certificate to many indigenous community groups, but why not in Papua?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mas Herlambang. We move to Grienda Komara. Are you with us, Grienda? Hello? Hello? Grienda? Okay, Mas Herlambang, you may just read the question and directly answer.
Yeah, I think this is what I've already presented, yeah, about the way of government to silence criticism because of they have digital infrastructure to limit the rights, yeah, and hence another problem is about impunity. Although many attacks considered as violating the law. But until present, I have not known who attacked Pak Wija's social media until present, and never known who actually carried out that digital attacks. But unfortunately, if the victim is the government, part of the regime, or part of the supporters of regime, I don't know why it's so easy to get somebody to be responsible, like Raffio Patra or somebody else. Yeah, I think friends from SafeNet or Mavindo perhaps can explain more about this. Yeah.
Yeah. You may also add your answer to respond from question from Taufan, because it seems like it has a connection with previous question and also your presentation, Mas.
Okay.
There's also a question from Mbak Anita Wahid.
Yeah, later on I will pass to her.
Oh, okay.
Because it is
why
similar,
Indonesia elites look so
scary.
sketchy and phobia with good point. Yeah. This is not about scary. Yeah? This is about the character of fascism, the character of authoritarian regimes. Yeah, in many countries. Yeah, I think you can check the elements of authoritarian regimes. It's clearly related to how to avoid criticism or to avoid other voices than the government said. It's clear. Therefore, no freedom of expression actually in situations that really authoritarian or fascism. You can check or learn from other countries. Yeah. Otherwise, we have another types of government. You can express, but no freedom of expression after expressing. It means that you can be easily sent to the jail.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Now I invite Mbak Anita, please.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Gulam. I think this one has already been mentioned by Mas Herlambang several times before about Johannesburg Principles. But I was wondering if there is any, a recognition by the government of Indonesia about the principles itself. Say, how does it work? Is it legally binding by all states, by all countries, or does it require a formal recognition by the government before it binds itself to the principles, or how does it work, Mas?
Yeah, okay. In the law, in the first semester, usually the students get sort of like a source of law, yeah, sumber-sumber hukum, and one of source law is not merely about those who are produced by the state and must be written as part of landmark decisions as produced by the court, but also legal doctrine. Legal doctrine is created by scholars, those who are expert, and even their expertise has been recognized by UN system in referring or in amplifying the importance of scholars' voices. And Johannesburg Principle is actually part of legal doctrines. And next, the question would be how the government can recognize this. Yeah, because this is legal doctrine. Yeah, it depends the court. It depends the president, whether they use or not. If they want to develop legal system, better legal system, and of course they should learn about the decision the court decision in European context or inter-American court system or many other court system. Or they can adopt legal doctrine in order to improve the law or improve the decisions. And interestingly, if you remember about the court decision, especially administrative court decisions, in dealing with the case internet shutdown in Papua, this is my usual my activity in providing expert testimony. I always write or typing my arguments, not always not using verbal, but also typing or in providing written statement. And in the last session during the court process, I always give this to the judges. And during internet shutdown court session, I made an article for that. And interestingly, the judges read this article, and even under the decision, they quoted general comments. Actually, that is not law. This is a doctrine from special rapporteur for human rights council. And for me, this is really a good signs from the younger generation of judges and women quoted doctrines for improving court rulings. So that's answering your question.
Okay. Thank you, Mas Herlambang. We also have colleagues from Malaysia, Dr. Wan Rohila Ganti. You'd like to speak, please? Hello? Are you with us? Dr. Wan Rohila Ganti? Because I think it is interesting to read your response about elites. Hello? Okay.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah, fine, thank you.
I'm still alive.
And Malaysia is politics in Malaysia is very interesting nowadays. Yeah, so perhaps Dr. Rohila Ganti can also share with us too.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, as I said, not only the elites in Indonesia is afraid of the criticism, especially on social media. It happens also in Malaysia. Just like in 2008 election in Malaysia, the ruling government, they did not believe in the power of social media, yet the opposition, they fully utilized the social media, and the result was 5 states fell into opposition. And the first remark from the former prime minister at that time was, we were deceived by the social media. So yeah, that's how it goes. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Any response, Mas Herlambang, and also concluding remarks from the discussion?
Thank you, Wan Rohila. Yeah, this is really what I've said in the very beginning my presentation. It's not typically Indonesia. It's also spread out in the regions and even in the world. The disruptions, digital attacks, fake news, and many others online attacks. And in response to Malaysia, yes, I think once I had opportunity to write article and book together with Aziz, Muhammad Aziz, and the second one is together with Ko Ying Ho. Both of them are from Malaysia, and we discussed together about this issue that is really typically almost similar Indonesia and Malaysia in response to digital rights or digital issues, targeting civilian for silencing critics. And somebody from Universitas Putra Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken, Wan Nur, I forgot her name. And we also has a coalition in defending our digital rights, yeah, in especially within academia circles, yeah, promoting this as human rights, digital rights as human rights. What is the last?
There is one question from Grinda Komara who'd like to say. Please, Grinda. Sorry, we cannot hear you. This is the last question for today.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. Can you speak louder, please?
Yeah. Mr. Herlambang, I also alumnus of Erlangga University from.
Oh, okay, students. Yeah, okay.
I want to ask if we compare the recent digital revision such as reformasi di korupsi with the previous one such as Save KPK and Cicak versus Buaya, we can say that reformasi di korupsi failed to prevent government to prevent the revision of anti-corruption law. Related to the declining democracy, can we say that the use of criminalization and the IT law contribute to the failure of reformasi di korupsi? Can you explain from political dimension, especially politics of law, related to the political power of Jokowi is weak because he's not a chairman of political party, then he tried to silence criticism as soon as possible, such as moral and the other things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Pak Gulam, I'm afraid since my answer would be not comprehensive enough, yeah. Since I know Widja Wijayanto, actually the one who did research on this issue.
Yes.
Perhaps Pak Widja can answer briefly.
We can invite the director of the summer course.
But this is your forum, Pak Herlambang.
I know, but you have a good or better answer than me. Yeah, of course. I learned from Pak Widja's research, yeah, because I'm part of collaborative partner for discussing his research. And it was really clear that the way to silence criticism during reformasi di korupsi has been massively used to attack groups, civil societies, and even academia, yeah, to stop the discourse or to stop the activism, yeah, although it's not really successfully stopping our interests for rejecting the revised draft of anti-graft commission, but still this is really bothering or really annoying, yeah, for us, and it's really typically the way of regime in memaksakan, ya, it's
to force,
to force their interest, for changing the law without considering widespread protest from the public, although it was for the first time, I think, Pak Widja, more than 1,000 academia put the signs in solidarity.
Actually, the last data was more than 3,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
More than 3,000.
That's a lot.
But the problem in current situations, especially in digital rights, perhaps this is my last statement.
Yes.
I just completed my readings on Kasus 10, The title of that book is Liars, Falsehoods, Free Speech, and In the Age of Deception. It's quite interesting book, yeah, because I just knew about his book because of his speech at the front of Constitutional Law International Conference. And based on that law, actually the way to silence criticism, not always with attacking them, not always by hijacking their social media, not bringing them to the court process or sending to the jail, but interestingly, they use digital attacks by making insignificant of the truth. So the truth can be denied because of making them insignificant, or even they can overturn the truth through their what is that, framing, yeah, in delivering the falsehoods, yeah, kebohongan. So our challenge for new generation or in the coming generation is really related to the data, related to the machine of falsehoods, yeah, falsehoods machine, yeah, mesin kebohongan, yes, in attacking digital rights. So that's all my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Herlambang, for your presentation and your response that really bring the new kind of insight in law of digital in Indonesia. Pak Wijayanto may add some comments before we stop.
Okay. Thank you to Mas Herlambang again. I think applause to him, yeah, from your own place. I think today we learned about the digital, the law aspect, yeah, of the digital thing. And tomorrow there will be a very interesting presentation, yeah, and movie as well from Dandi Dwi Laksono. Mas Herlambang in his presentation mentioned him, yeah, as one of the victims. So Dandi tweeted about Papua. It's critical, but I don't believe that it's you know, because it can be considered as hate speech, because you know the object was the Papua, right? Not specific names. But perhaps tomorrow we can hear the story, but not just that, but tomorrow we also talk about the environment. So this is often the neglected issue, yeah, when we talk about democracy and when we talk about you know, digital thing. Tomorrow we will learn that the digital activism will have something to do, or could have something to do with environmental issues. I think this is the kind of issues that we can together discuss, because this environmental issue is across boundaries, right? When we talk about climate change, no country can solve this alone. So we have to be together to face this together. And also, like just like the pandemic, I think tomorrow will be fascinating. And the day after tomorrow, Wat Barskut, my actually he was my supervisor, yeah, my professor in Leiden, but now we're colleagues. And I will present more, perhaps one of the things about what we discussed today about KPK, yeah, about the cyber troop, cyber terror, and other things that relate with it. So please stay tuned. Come with us tomorrow earlier, yeah, on time, because there will be many fascinating, you know, materials and presentation we will have until the end of this summer course. And who will announce this, Pak Gulam or me or Pak Gulam?
You.
Oh, okay. And I will
you're the director.
announce another thing. So we we plan, yeah, me and the co-host as well, Pak Gulam as well. We plan an invitation for you to write 700 until 1,000 words of article that based on what you have learned so far, and to analyze some problems related to some digital problems, yeah, in your own countries, based on your own experience, and you can send the first draft by the first before the 1st September, so before the end of the session, and the draft we will review and edit the draft so it can be published in Alter-C website in Paris, or in LP3S website. And we will edit it so you can send it to, for instance, the conversation. Yeah. So from learning with us, there will be something you can produce. Yeah, and it will be a written version. I wonder if Truly Estrelita still here. Perhaps you can add something, because Truly is the one from Alter-C.
Yes, I'm here, Wija.
Yes.
Yes. So it is really a pleasure to have all of you here today and to have you in this summer course. And we are thinking that perhaps we can continue, our discussion not only during the summer course, but even after the summer course. That's why we would like to invite you to write a short article about 700 and 1,200 words. And we would love to accompany you during the writing, and then we will publish them on our website. And of course, if you would like to publish in another place, it will be a pleasure as well for us. For example, for the conversation. So all article written in English for your information. So not in Indonesian.
Yeah, and not in Thailand or in Malay as well. And perhaps some of you are from Italy, right? Like Elo, if you wrote in Italy, then I will be.
Yeah, it will be
I will
complicated
be able to edit it, of course. Yeah. So yeah, that would be the written version of the announcement will be announced in our WhatsApp group as well. Yeah. So that would be it. Thank you. I will return it to Pak Gulam to end the session.
Yeah. Thank you, Mas Herlambang, again.
Sorry, Pak Wianto. The article is about our country. I mean, the provincial initiative in Italy, for example.
Sorry, what did you say? Can you say it again, Elo?
And the article should be about our country. I mean, from Italy.
Yes. From your own country, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you don't talk, for instance, about Semarang, yeah. Of course, maybe you know about it, but because we want to know, yeah, we want to have or identify at least, yeah, and learn from you as well. So if you talk about Semarang or Indonesia, then perhaps nothing we can share. If, for instance, our colleague here, Wan Rohila, perhaps she could tell about the situation in Malaysia, that would be interesting. Our friend from Myanmar, yeah, from Philippines, yeah. So in the end of the session, we can share the product to all of you, and we can learn together based on the empirical experience from all of you, right? There is, of course, a book about it by some author like Rostep, but we want to know what we have experienced. So I think that's also the way to learn, yeah, and to broaden our horizon.
Okay, thank you.
Wija, may I add something?
Yes.
Is it possible to do a comparative, study? For example, like Elo, he's from Italy. Perhaps he can write an article comparing the situation in Italy and Indonesia. For example, it just.
Okay. Yes, of course. I think that would be an idea. Yeah, as long as Elo not just write about Indonesia, yeah, or comparison is okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Pak Wija. And to the participant, just try to make this as an incentive. Along with the summer course, we can have some, articles, and if we are a little bit lucky.
Pak Gulam, sorry, there's a question here. I'm a bit confused. So there's one chemistry test, task and one voluntary. No, actually, there's only one task, yeah, or one assignment, we can say, and it can be published either in the conversation or in the website of LP3S or Altersea. So after you send your first draft, we will decide, or we will give a suggestion in which channel or website it will fit the most.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so thank you. And the detail for the writing will be distributed soon using WhatsApp group. And maybe tomorrow we can discuss further, because we also will meet still with Pak Wija as a director, and maybe we have a detailed conceptual about the writing. Thank you so much, Pak Herlambang, our speakers, and the participant. Hopefully see you again tomorrow. Bye.
Terima kasih semuanya.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Stay healthy,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you. Stay happy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Terima kasih, Mas Herlambang.